Homeless girl dragged a native baby from a burning cabin. Next day, 500 warriors lined the hills. The young girl had walked for hours through the quiet frozen forest, her bare feet crunching softly against the frost-covered leaves and twigs. Her clothes were thin and worn, and the cold air made her shiver uncontrollably. She had no home, no family, and no one to care for her. Every day was a struggle to find shelter and food. She learned to move quickly, avoid dangerous paths, and sleep wherever she could without being noticed. Some nights she rested under broken trees, while other nights she curled up behind old stone walls or in empty sheds. She was small, thin, and fragile, but there was a fire in her heart that would not let her give up. That evening, as the sky grew darker, she saw a thin ribbon of smoke curling into the air from somewhere deep in the hills. At first, she thought it might be a campfire, a harmless glow for warmth, but the smell carried a different tone, sharp and uneasy. She stopped and sniffed the cold air. Her heart beat faster. Something was wrong. Despite being afraid, she felt a pull toward it. She had always been careful, never trusting strangers, never putting herself in danger. But something about this smoke made her pause. She knew that someone, or something, might need her help. Her curiosity mingled with fear, but it was stronger than her caution. She began walking toward the source, her bare toes numb, her lungs filling with the crisp winter air. The path was rough and hidden by overgrown brush. Branches scratched her arms, and the cold bit into her skin. She stumbled over roots and rocks, but she did not stop. With each step, the smoke became heavier, and a strange warmth flickered against her face. Soon, she saw the cabin. It was small, made of old wooden planks that were cracked and worn by years of weather. Flames danced along the edges of the roof, and thick black smoke poured from the windows. The smell of burning wood was strong and sharp, making her eyes water and her lungs burn. Her heart raced, and she froze for a moment at the edge of the clearing, not sure if she could go any closer. But then, she heard it. A soft, tiny cry that seemed to come from inside the cabin. It was so small, so fragile, and so desperate that it made her forget her fear. She had to help. She ran toward the cabin, dodging falling branches and broken roof beams. The front door was blocked by charred boards that had fallen in from the fire. Smoke poured through the gaps, stinging her eyes and making her cough. Her mind raced, thinking of what she could do. She tried to push the boards away with her hands, but they were heavy, blackened and splintered. Sweat and ash mixed on her face, but she kept trying. Each pull, each effort made her more determined. Inside, she could hear the baby crying more loudly now, a sound that pulled at her heart like nothing else ever had. Finally, with a forceful heave, one board shifted just enough to create a small gap. She squatted low and peered through, her eyes scanning the smoky darkness. On the floor, wrapped in a thin, dirty blanket, was a tiny baby. The child was pale and coughing, its little body trembling. The sight of it made the girl's chest tighten. She had never held a baby before, but instinct took over. She reached through the gap, her hands shaking, and carefully lifted the small child into her arms. The fire crackled louder behind her, and the floor under her feet seemed ready to collapse. But she did not hesitate. Holding the baby close to her chest, she began to crawl backward through the gap she had made, feeling the heat of the flames on her back. Every movement was slow and careful, but urgency pushed her forward. She could not let the child be left behind. When she finally emerged from the cabin, the fresh, cold air hit her face, and she gasped for breath. Her hair was covered with soot, her hands blackened, and her clothes singed in places. She stumbled over roots and uneven ground, clutching the baby tightly. The little one's cries were soft but continuous, and she hummed a gentle tune she barely remembered, hoping it would calm the child. Her own body ached, her arms burned, and her legs felt weak, but she kept moving. She could not stop. She had saved a life, and nothing else mattered in that moment. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, she collapsed onto the frozen grass at the edge of the hill. She wrapped the baby with her worn jacket, holding it close to keep it warm. Her teeth chattered, and the baby coughed softly. But both of them were alive. She watched the cabin from a distance as it burned completely, feeling a strange mixture of fear and relief. The fire's light danced across the hills, casting shadows that seemed to reach out like hands. She felt alone, but also strangely connected to the child she had saved. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of purpose. She had risked everything for someone else, and somehow it had mattered. The night stretched on, cold and quiet. She built a small fire far from the cabin ruins, using broken branches and fallen wood. The baby rested in her arms, eyes closing briefly as the heat from the flames touched its face. She hummed quietly, soft words that were more about comfort than song. She had no idea where the child's family was, or if they were still alive. She did not know if anyone would come looking. All she knew was that she could not abandon the baby. She had nothing to offer except herself, her body for warmth, and her will to protect. She whispered promises she barely understood herself, vowing to keep the child safe no matter what. The stars moved slowly across the sky, shining over the dark hills. The girl stayed awake, watching the shadows, listening for any sound that might signal danger or rescue. Each small noise, the rustling of leaves, a distant owl, the crackle of her fire, made her heart leap. She clutched the baby tighter, feeling its tiny hands grasp at her fingers. It was fragile, innocent, and completely trusting. She realized that this small life depended entirely on her, and that thought gave her strength she did not know she had. The cold and fear still pressed against her, but a new feeling had grown inside her. Responsibility, courage, and a quiet determination. Through the long night she kept the baby warm and safe, humming lullabies, rocking gently, and listening to the crackling fire. Time seemed to move slowly, yet she never felt a moment pass without tension. Every shadow could be danger, every sound a signal that she was discovered. She had survived alone for a long time, but tonight she was not alone. She had someone else to protect, and that made all the difference. The firelight danced on the hills, casting both darkness and hope. The night was long, but the girl's resolve never faltered. She held the baby close, waiting for the first signs of morning, knowing that dawn might bring help or new challenges. Whatever happened, she was ready to face it, because she had already faced the fire, and she had already won the first battle. The morning air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of smoke and wet earth. The girl stirred slightly, still holding the small baby wrapped tightly in her jacket. The child's tiny face was pale, and its little hands curled into fists as it slept against her chest. For a moment, she just watched the baby breathe, counting each little rise and fall. She had never felt this kind of connection before. All the loneliness and fear that had filled her life seemed to shrink away, replaced by a deep, protective feeling. She knew she had to keep moving, but for now she allowed herself a few moments of quiet, listening to the wind rustling through the frost-covered leaves. The cabin she had escaped from yesterday had burned completely, leaving only blackened wood and ashes scattered across the clearing. The fire had grown quickly, consuming the old structure before anyone could stop it. She wondered how it had started. Perhaps a cooking fire had been left unattended, or maybe it had been an accident with a lantern. She did not know, and she did not have time to think too much about it. All that mattered was that the baby was safe, and that she needed to find a better place to wait until help came. The forest around her was quiet, but the danger of exposure and the cold remained. She wrapped the child more tightly and scanned the hills. The shadows from the trees were long, and the sunlight barely touched the frozen ground. She began walking again, moving slowly down the slope of the hill. Every step was careful because the ground was slippery and uneven. She kept the baby close, whispering soft words to calm it. It stirred a little, eyes blinking open, and she smiled gently. "It's okay, little one," she said quietly. "I'm here. You're safe with me." The child cooed softly, and for a moment the girl felt a warmth inside her that she had never known. She had always been alone, and now she had someone depending on her. That responsibility made her feel both scared and strong at the same time. As she moved through the trees, she noticed small signs of life in the forest. Birds flitted between the branches, and the faint sound of a stream ran nearby. She followed the sound, hoping to find water for herself and the baby. When she reached the stream, the girl knelt carefully on the icy ground. She cupped her hands and let the cold water flow into them, taking small sips. Then she carefully wet a cloth she had carried and wiped the baby's tiny face, cleaning away the soot and ash from the fire. The baby looked up at her with wide eyes, and she laughed softly, relieved that it seemed unharmed. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel a small bit of happiness. While the baby rested against her chest, she thought about what she should do next. She did not know the child's family or where they lived, and she had no way to find them. She had no food except a small piece of bread she had saved in her pocket, and she knew it would not last long. She decided that the safest option was to move toward the hills where she might find other people, hoping they could help her and the child. She had learned over the years that strangers could be dangerous, but sometimes kindness existed in unexpected places. She had to take that chance. Holding the baby tightly, she set off again, stepping carefully through the frozen grass and broken branches. The forest grew thicker as she climbed higher into the hills. The trees were older here, their branches tangled, and the shadows longer. She moved silently, listening for any sound of humans or animals. Occasionally she saw signs that someone had passed through, footprints in the soft mud or broken branches along the path. She wondered who had been here and if they might help her. Her mind returned again to the fire, the cabin, and the baby crying inside. She felt proud of herself for acting quickly, but also anxious. What if someone came looking for the child and blamed her? The thought made her quicken her pace, keeping the baby close and warm against her chest. Hours passed as she moved through the hills, stopping occasionally to rest. Each time she paused, she scanned the horizon, hoping to see a sign of help. The baby slept most of the time, its breathing calm and steady. She hummed softly, a tune she remembered from a distant memory of being cared for herself long ago. The sound of her voice seemed to comfort both of them. At one point she found a small patch of grass near a fallen tree and used it to sit down for a short while. She shared a small bite of bread with the baby, carefully breaking it into tiny pieces. The baby nibbled, and she smiled, feeling a sense of relief. Even in the cold, even in danger, the baby survived. As the day wore on, clouds began to gather, and a light snow started to fall. The flakes drifted gently onto her hair and clothes. She shivered, but kept moving, not wanting to stay in one place too long. The snow made the path slippery, and she had to be extra careful with each step. Her small hands, already raw from the cold and the previous day's effort, ached as she held the baby tightly. She knew she could not stop. The hills seemed endless, and the shadows from the trees made the forest look darker than it was. Yet she pressed on, driven by the need to keep the child safe. By late afternoon, she reached a small clearing near the top of a hill. From this vantage point, she could see the forest stretching for miles below, a patchwork of trees and frozen streams. She paused, taking a deep breath, and scanned the horizon. That's when she noticed movement in the distance, figures walking slowly along a ridge. Her heart skipped a beat. Could they be people who might help? Or could they be strangers who would bring danger? She held the baby closer, her eyes wide as she watched the figures grow closer. Something in their movement, the way they carried themselves, gave her hope. They did not seem threatening. Not yet. She waited quietly, ready to act if she needed to. The figures continued moving, their numbers growing. Soon she realized there were dozens of them. They were tall, strong, and confident, wearing clothing that seemed different from hers. She could see the glint of sunlight on metal and leather, and the way they moved made it clear they were organized. Her mind raced. Who were they? Warriors, perhaps? People from a nearby village. Her instincts told her to stay hidden, but she could not leave the baby alone. She whispered softly, "Stay close, little one. We will be safe." The baby stirred, opening its eyes and looking up at her. She smiled weakly, feeling both fear and hope at the same time. As the warriors approached the clearing, the girl noticed that they carried no weapons in a threatening way. Instead, they moved carefully, scanning the area as if they were searching for someone. She realized that they might be looking for the baby, for its safety, just as she had been. Her chest tightened with relief. Perhaps they were here to help. She slowly stood, still holding the baby close, and took a step forward. The warriors paused, noticing her movement. One of them, taller than the others and older in appearance, raised a hand, not in anger, but as if to ask her to stop. She froze, unsure what to do, but held the baby tighter. She knew that everything depended on this moment. The elder stepped forward slowly, moving with careful grace. His eyes were kind, yet full of authority. He looked at the baby in her arms, then at her, and spoke in a soft voice. She could not understand the words, but the tone was gentle. She nodded slowly, showing she meant no harm. The baby cooed softly, sensing the calm in the elder's presence. Other warriors began to form a line behind him, watching carefully, but not threateningly. The girl realized that she had found help, that the fear and struggle of the past day might finally have an end. She took a deep breath, feeling both exhaustion and relief. She had carried the baby through fire, cold, and fear, and now, at last, there was hope. The elder reached out, and she carefully placed the baby into his arms. The baby was small and fragile, but safe. The warrior smiled gently, holding the child close, checking that it was unharmed. The other warriors relaxed, some kneeling, some standing, all showing respect for what she had done. Tears welled in her eyes. She had acted without thought for herself, only for the child, and it had mattered. The cold, fear, and exhaustion seemed to lift slightly. For the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her, a place where courage and kindness were recognized. The girl watched as the warriors began to move together, leading her and the baby toward the edge of the hills. They walked slowly, carefully, giving her time to adjust, and the baby time to rest. The forest around them seemed less threatening now, bathed in the pale light of the setting sun. She felt a mix of hope, gratitude, and wonder. This day had been long, full of fear and danger, yet it had also brought her to a turning point. The baby was safe, and she was no longer completely alone. The hills, which had seemed endless and forbidding, now offered a path toward something new, a chance to be part of a world that could be kind and protective, if she trusted. The girl followed the warriors down the winding path through the hills, her bare feet sinking into the snow in some places and slipping on icy patches in others. She held herself upright, though exhaustion weighed heavily on her small frame. Her muscles ached from yesterday's climb and the strain of carrying the baby, but she refused to slow down too much. She had learned early in life that resting for too long could leave her vulnerable. Yet something about the presence of the warriors made her feel protected. They moved with a quiet confidence, scanning the surroundings while keeping their eyes on her. She realized that they were cautious, but not threatening, and it gave her a fragile sense of trust. The baby, still wrapped in layers of her worn jacket, shifted slightly, murmuring in its sleep. She gently stroked its small head, careful not to wake it too harshly. Even in this moment of relief, she felt the responsibility of keeping the child safe pressing against her chest. Her thoughts drifted to the hours she had spent running from danger, from cold, from hunger. And she realized something profound. For the first time, she had not only survived, but had acted for someone else. The feeling filled her with warmth she had not known she could feel. She looked around at the towering trees, their branches heavy with snow, and the shadows stretching across the hills. The forest, which had seemed dark and unwelcoming, now appeared almost alive, as if it recognized her effort and courage. They reached a small plateau, where the wind was colder and sharper, but the view was breathtaking. Below them the valley opened into a vast expanse of forest, dotted with clearings and streams that glinted in the sunlight. The warrior stopped for a moment, forming a circle around her. The elder who had first approached stepped forward and lowered his gaze to meet hers. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes, a wordless acknowledgment of the danger she had faced, and the courage she had shown. He gestured toward the valley, then to the child, as if explaining that she had done something remarkable. Though she did not understand the language, the tone, the gestures, and the gentle expressions were enough. Relief and pride surged in her chest, mingling with lingering fear and exhaustion. As they began moving again, she noticed subtle signs of life in the hills, smoke rising faintly from distant cabins, the sound of a stream trickling nearby, and the occasional flash of an animal moving between the trees. Each sound and movement reminded her that the world was alive and full of possibilities. She felt a flicker of hope she had not experienced in months. For so long she had wandered alone, unseen and unheard. Yet now, she was part of something larger, moving alongside people who seemed to value what she had done. Even though she could not communicate easily with them, their presence was enough to make her feel less alone. They moved steadily down the slope, keeping a slow, deliberate pace. The baby stirred again, opening its eyes and looking up at her with wide, curious eyes. She smiled softly and whispered, "We are almost there. You will be safe soon." The warmth of the small body against her chest made her feel lighter despite the exhaustion. She had never felt this kind of connection with another living being, not even with animals she had cared for in the past. The bond between her and the baby was unspoken but undeniable. Every step she took felt purposeful, each breath a reminder that she had survived the fire and the cold to reach this point. As the afternoon deepened, clouds gathered in the sky, casting a soft gray light over the hills. Snow began to fall lightly, dusting their hair and clothes in delicate flakes. The girl shivered, but kept moving, adjusting the baby in her arms to protect it from the wind. The warriors noticed and subtly shifted their positions, forming a protective line around her. Their silent care made her feel more at ease, even though she could not fully understand their intentions. She realized that she was being accepted into their circle, if only for the moment, and that feeling gave her a strength she had never known she possessed. They approached a narrow path that led to a dense grove of trees. The snow underfoot was deeper here, and the branches hung low with frost. The girl moved carefully, stepping lightly to avoid tripping. The baby yawned and curled closer to her chest, seemingly comforted by the rhythm of her movements. She hummed the same tune she had used the night before, a melody that had become a quiet ritual for both of them. The sound seemed to calm the child, whose soft coos mixed with the whisper of the wind through the branches. The girl found herself feeling a sense of calm as well, a brief pause from the constant fear and uncertainty that had defined her life for so long. Hours passed as they navigated through the grove. The girl kept her eyes on the horizon, looking for any sign of shelter or a place where they could rest. Her mind wandered back to the fire, the smoke, and the baby's cries inside the burning cabin. She remembered the fear that had gripped her and the strength she had summoned to pull the child from danger. The memory was vivid, almost as if it had happened yesterday, and it reminded her of the courage she carried within herself. Even though she was small and alone, she had acted decisively, and that action had made all the difference. By late afternoon, the grove opened into a larger clearing. In the distance, she saw the faint outline of a village at the base of the hills. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the sound of activity, voices, laughter, and the clatter of daily life reached her ears. Relief washed over her, and she instinctively held the baby closer. The warriors slowed their pace, allowing her to take in the sight. She felt her heart lift at the thought that the baby would soon be safe, surrounded by people who could care for it. For the first time, the constant anxiety that had accompanied her every step began to ease. As they approached the edge of the clearing, the elder spoke to the girl in a calm, deliberate voice. Though she could not understand the words, the tone was kind, and his gestures were welcoming. He motioned toward the village, then to the child, and back to her, conveying that she had nothing to fear and that the baby would be taken care of. The girl nodded slowly, still holding the baby tightly. She felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and apprehension. She had spent so long surviving alone, and now she was about to enter a world of people who could offer safety and care. The thought was both comforting and frightening. The warriors led her down the final slope, their presence forming a protective barrier between her and any potential danger. The baby stirred once more, stretching its tiny limbs, and the girl smiled softly. She could feel the warmth of life returning to both of them, a sense of normalcy after the chaos of the past day. The village drew closer, and she could see children playing, adults working, and animals moving about. The familiar sounds of daily life were almost overwhelming after so long in the cold, empty forest. She felt both hope and nervousness, unsure how the villagers would react, but trusting in the silent promise of the warriors beside her. As they reached the village, people began to notice their arrival. Eyes turned, conversations paused, and a gentle hush spread through the streets. The girl felt a mixture of fear and pride, unsure how she would be received. The elder stepped forward, holding the baby high, showing the child to the villagers. The baby cooed and reached out, and a wave of recognition and relief passed through the crowd. She realized that the child had been missing or in danger, and her actions had brought it safely to them. The realization filled her chest with a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. She had risked everything for someone else, and it had mattered. The villagers approached slowly, curiosity and gratitude in their expressions. The girl stayed behind the elder, still holding the baby as he examined it carefully. The child's tiny hands grasped at the elder's fingers, and the girl felt a wave of relief. They were kind, gentle, and welcoming, and she realized that this was a place of safety, a place where the baby could grow and thrive. She felt a warmth in her heart that she had never known, a sense of belonging she had long thought impossible. The cold, fear, and loneliness that had defined her life seemed to melt away in the presence of these people. The elder finally turned to her, his eyes kind and understanding. He gestured for her to come closer, then motioned to a small building nearby, suggesting a place to rest. She nodded, still holding the baby, and followed. The warmth of the village and the presence of the warriors made her feel secure, and she realized that for the first time, she did not have to hide or run. She could rest, breathe, and begin to feel the weight of her courage and care. The journey through fire, cold, and fear had brought her here, and she understood that her actions had changed not only the child's life, but her own as well. As she settled inside the small building, placing the baby gently on a warm blanket, she felt a deep sense of relief and accomplishment. The child was safe, the warriors were watching over them, and the villagers were welcoming. She had survived the night, the fire, and the forest, and now she could begin to recover. She realized that the world, though harsh and unpredictable, also held moments of kindness and hope. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that she could be part of something bigger, a community that could offer care, protection, and understanding. The next morning, the girl woke to the soft light of the rising sun spilling through the small window of the room where she had slept. The warmth of the blankets and the gentle hum of activity outside felt almost unreal after the harsh cold of the hills. The baby stirred in its sleep, tiny fingers curling around the edge of the blanket, and she smiled softly. She had slept for the first time in days, without fear of fire, cold, or being alone. But her heart still raced with anticipation. Today she would see what the elder and the warriors had planned. Something in the air felt important, almost like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. She wrapped the baby securely in her jacket and stepped outside. The cold morning air bit at her cheeks, but it was refreshing compared to the biting winds of the forest. The village was awake, buzzing with quiet activity. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the soft clatter of tools and voices filled the air. Yet, the girl's attention was drawn to the hills surrounding the village. There, in the soft glow of dawn, she saw them. Hundreds of warriors lined along the slopes, standing tall and still, their faces calm but determined. Her breath caught in her throat. The sight was unlike anything she had ever seen, a sea of people moving as one, silent and purposeful. The elder approached her slowly, his expression kind but serious. He gestured toward the hills, then back to the baby, and nodded. She understood immediately. These warriors had gathered not in anger, not in threat, but in protection. They were here for the child, and perhaps for her too. A mix of awe and fear filled her chest. She had never been part of anything so vast, so unified. Yet the calm in the elder's eyes reassured her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the baby in her arms and the gravity of the moment. As the sun rose higher, the warriors began moving in unison, descending from the hills toward the village. Their steps were deliberate, measured, and silent. They carried no weapons in a threatening way, only items that suggested readiness and vigilance. The girl watched, feeling a strange mix of fear and hope. She could see the strength in their movements, the power of numbers, but there was no hostility. Each warrior's eyes were fixed on the child, and she realized that every step they took was meant to ensure safety, not harm. The baby stirred again, sensing the quiet energy around them, and the girl held it closer, whispering softly to keep it calm. The villagers began to notice the movement in the hills. Some came to the edges of their homes, watching silently as the warriors approached. Others stayed inside, peering cautiously through windows. The girl felt her heart pound. She had no idea how the villagers would react to so many outsiders descending upon them, yet the elder walked confidently, as if he knew they would understand. When the warriors reached the village's open field, they stopped and formed a wide semicircle, leaving the center open. The girl held the baby close, stepping forward hesitantly. She could see the anticipation in the eyes of the villagers, their curiosity mixing with a hint of fear and respect. The elder gestured toward her, then toward the child, and finally back to the warriors. Though she did not understand his words, the tone was clear. The baby had been found, safe, and it was because of her bravery. The girl felt a swell of emotion. Relief, pride, and a quiet happiness mingled inside her. She had acted out of instinct, without thought for her own safety, and it had made a difference. The baby was safe, surrounded by hundreds of people ready to protect it. She realized that her life, though filled with hardship and solitude, had led her to this exact moment of purpose. Slowly she stepped forward, offering the child to the elder. He took the baby carefully, holding it close and examining it for any signs of injury or distress. The child cooed softly, reaching tiny fingers toward the elder's face. She watched as the warriors and villagers reacted. Some smiled quietly, others knelt, and a few nodded in solemn respect. The girl had never been acknowledged in this way before. Her courage, her care, and her perseverance were recognized not through words, but through the actions of those around her. The realization filled her with a sense of belonging she had never known, a warmth that reached deep into her soul. The elder spoke briefly to the warriors, giving silent instructions, and they began to move back up the hills, leaving the girl and the baby in the center of the field. The villagers approached slowly, offering gentle gestures of welcome and curiosity. The girl felt shy, uncertain, but the kindness in their eyes reassured her. One woman knelt beside her, speaking softly in a language she did not understand, but conveying warmth and welcome through tone and gesture. Another villager brought a small bowl of warm water and cloth, which she used to clean the baby's face. Every action, every look, told her that she was no longer alone. She had become part of something larger, a community that valued life and bravery. As the morning progressed, the girl began to notice more details about the village. Children played nearby, laughing and chasing each other across the open field. Adults tended to animals, repaired homes, and prepared food. Smoke drifted from small chimneys, mixing with the crisp morning air. The warriors, now positioned on the hills above, kept watch silently, their presence a comforting reminder that the baby was protected. She realized that this community, though unfamiliar, was filled with a quiet strength and harmony. It was a place where courage and care were recognized, where the protection of life mattered more than anything else. The girl found a small bench near the edge of the field and sat down carefully, placing the baby on her lap. She stroked its soft hair, feeling the warmth and life that she had fought so hard to protect. The baby reached up and grasped her fingers, and she smiled, overwhelmed by the connection. She thought back to the burning cabin, the smoke, and the terror of that moment. She had acted without hesitation, and her bravery had brought them both here. Now, surrounded by hundreds of protective warriors and a welcoming village, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment and relief. Throughout the day, the villagers approached one by one, offering food, blankets, and words of comfort. Though she could not understand all of them, their gestures spoke louder than any language. She realized that she had found a place of safety, a place where she could rest and breathe without fear. The warriors on the hills remained vigilant, scanning the surrounding forest, but there was no tension, only watchful care. The girl marveled at their discipline and unity, feeling both humbled and inspired by the silent strength around her. By midday, the elder returned, carrying the baby gently in his arms. He knelt before her, bowing slightly, and then gestured for her to approach. She stepped forward cautiously, her heart beating with anticipation. The elder placed the baby back in her arms, holding her hands as if to show trust and gratitude. She felt a swell of pride and emotion. She had acted alone, guided only by instinct and courage, and now she was recognized and valued. The warriors on the hills raised their heads in acknowledgement, and the villagers watched with quiet respect. The girl understood, without words, that she had done something extraordinary. As the afternoon sun moved across the sky, the girl and the baby sat together in the warm light, surrounded by a community that offered care and protection. The warrior presence on the hills reminded her of the danger she had faced, but also of the strength that kindness and courage could create. For the first time in her life, she felt truly safe, truly connected. The experience had changed her, showing her that even in a world full of hardship, acts of bravery and compassion could create profound impact. She watched the hills in the distance, knowing that the warriors remained there, vigilant and ready. A sense of awe washed over her. Hundreds of people, strong and silent, had gathered for the sake of a small child because of her actions. It was a sight she would never forget. And as she held the baby close, feeling its warmth and trust, she realized that she had also found a new beginning for herself. The journey through fire, fear, and the wilderness had brought her here, to safety, recognition, and belonging. The girl sat quietly on the soft grass just outside the village, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of calm that she had never known. The cold of the forest, the smoke from the cabin, the fear of being alone, all of it seemed distant now. She glanced up at the hills, where the warriors still stood in lines, silent and watchful, their eyes scanning the horizon. Their presence was a reminder that while danger could still exist, there were people in the world willing to protect and defend those who could not protect themselves. For the first time, she understood that courage and kindness could ripple far beyond a single act. The villagers had begun to approach more freely now, bringing small gifts of food, warm cloth, and blankets. The girl hesitated at first, unsure if she could accept their generosity. For so long, she had survived alone, trusting no one, relying only on her instincts and her own strength. But the kindness in their faces, the gentle tone in their voices, and the careful way they approached her and the baby made her realize that here, she was not alone. She could rest, she could eat, and she could feel safe. She offered quiet thanks, though she could not speak their language fully, and the villagers smiled, understanding her gratitude. The elder stepped forward and motioned for her to come with him. He led her toward a small building near the center of the village. Inside there were soft blankets, a warm fire, and a place for her to sit while the baby could rest safely. She carefully laid the child down, brushing back its tiny hair and adjusting the blanket around it. Watching the baby sleep, she felt a surge of relief and joy. It had survived the fire, the cold, and the long journey, and now it was safe. Her heart swelled with pride, not for herself, but for having saved this life. The elder watched silently, nodding in approval, showing that he understood the significance of her courage. The villagers began to gather around, speaking softly, asking questions she could not answer. She smiled and shook her head gently, indicating that she did not know much. Instead, she gestured to the baby and pointed to herself, trying to explain, in her simple way, that she had found the child and kept it safe. The villagers nodded, some reaching out to touch the baby gently, others placing their hands on their hearts in acknowledgement. The girl realized that this silent communication, these small gestures, were enough to convey her bravery and her intentions. She felt a strange warmth, a sense of belonging, that she had never experienced in her life before. The warriors on the hills began to descend slowly, moving in a deliberate, quiet formation. They had finished their watch for the morning, but their presence was still reassuring. The girl noticed how coordinated and disciplined they were, their eyes scanning the surrounding hills even as they walked toward the village. They came closer, surrounding the girl and the baby, not to intimidate, but to offer protection. She could feel the weight of their respect, their silent acknowledgement of her courage and determination. She realized that through her actions, she had not only saved the baby, but had also earned the trust and respect of these strong and honorable people. As the day went on, the girl and the baby were offered food, warm bread, sweet porridge, and fresh water. She ate slowly, savoring the simple taste of nourishment, something she had gone without for days. She watched the baby feed and felt a sense of contentment that she had never known. For so long she had wandered alone, her only focus survival. Now she could experience something she had never allowed herself to feel: comfort. The warmth of the fire, the kindness of the villagers, and the steady presence of the warriors all contributed to a sense of safety she had never imagined possible. Children from the village began to approach, their faces bright with curiosity. They had seen the girl and the baby being brought in by the warriors, and now they wanted to see for themselves. She smiled softly, feeling a connection even to these young strangers. One child offered a small toy made from cloth and string. She accepted it quietly, holding it up for the baby, who reached out and grabbed it with tiny fingers. The simple act of play, of sharing, reminded her that life could continue even after fear and danger. She realized that the baby's survival had created a ripple effect of hope and joy in the village, touching even those who had only watched from a distance. The elder approached again and motioned for her to follow. She stood carefully, holding the baby, and walked with him toward a small clearing near the village center. There the warriors were lined up, hundreds of them, standing tall and strong on the slopes. The sight was breathtaking. The girl realized that they had gathered for her, not in judgment, but in acknowledgement of her bravery. Each warrior's gaze met hers for a brief moment, conveying silent respect. Her heart thumped, and she felt a strange mixture of awe and humility. She had never been part of something so significant, and yet here she was, recognized for an act of selfless courage. The elder gestured for her to stand in the center of the clearing. She placed the baby gently on a soft blanket on the ground and stood beside it, feeling the eyes of hundreds of people upon her. The villagers and warriors alike watched quietly, the air filled with anticipation. Though she did not understand the language, the tone, gestures, and expressions made it clear she had done something extraordinary. The baby was safe because of her, and she had earned the trust and gratitude of these people. She felt tears prick at her eyes, not from fear, but from relief, pride, and a profound sense of belonging. The elder approached and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. He smiled, and though she could not understand the words, she felt their meaning. "You are safe. You are valued. You are part of us now." The warriors and villagers began to nod and murmur among themselves, acknowledging her courage. Children clung to their parents' hands, some pointing and whispering, and adults exchanged smiles and gestures of approval. She realized that her life, though once lonely and harsh, had now intersected with others in a way that created meaning and recognition. She had acted in a moment of fear and instinct, yet her bravery had been seen and honored by an entire community. As the day continued, the girl began to explore the village slowly. She carried the baby gently, allowing it to observe the surroundings safely. She saw people working, tending animals, preparing food, and caring for one another. The sense of community and cooperation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Seada, she felt a quiet hope growing in her chest. Perhaps, she thought, she could find a place here, a new home where she would not have to fight for every breath. She could rest, learn, and grow alongside people who valued life, courage, and care. The sun began to set, casting long golden rays across the hills. The warriors began to retreat back to their posts along the slopes, keeping watch for any threats, but the tension of the morning had eased. The girl found a quiet spot near the fire where she could sit with the baby. She wrapped it tightly in her jacket, feeling the warmth and softness of the child against her chest. The baby cooed softly, stretching tiny fingers, and yawning. She whispered to it, "We are safe now. We made it." For the first time in her life, she truly believed it. She had survived fire, cold, fear, and loneliness. And through it all, she had created a bond, protected a life, and found a place in the world where she could belong. As night fell, the village quieted. The stars twinkled above, and the soft glow of fires illuminated the paths and homes. The girl sat with the baby, feeling the exhaustion of the past days melt away. She allowed herself to lean back, resting her head against a warm blanket, and closed her eyes. She thought of the cabin, the smoke, the hills, and the warriors. She thought of every step she had taken to protect the child. She realized that courage, even in the smallest person, could create ripples that reached far beyond what one could imagine. She had acted from instinct, but it had changed everything. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the gentle hum of the village and the watchful eyes of the warriors on the hills, she understood something profound. Her life, once filled with fear and loneliness, now had purpose. She had acted selflessly, and it had mattered. The baby was safe, the village acknowledged her courage, and the warriors had honored her actions. For the first time, she could dream of a future where she was not alone, where she could find warmth, care, and belonging. She held the baby close, feeling its steady heartbeat, and whispered softly, "We are safe. We belong." And in that moment, the girl realized that her journey through fire, fear, and the cold had led her to something extraordinary. A new beginning, a place of safety, and a life connected to others by courage, compassion, and hope. She had faced the worst and survived, and now, for the first time, she could truly rest, knowing that both she and the baby had a chance to grow, thrive, and belong.